This is the July All About Writing webinar. I'm very pleased and delighted to welcome Tony Park and Bonnie Espie on the eve of their new novels. I'm not sure. Bonnie, is it released yet? Or yes, it has been released.
Yeah, mine's released.
Tony's is about to be released. Let me introduce them briefly and then we can begin. Number one, I'm Richard Bainan from All About Writing. Tony Park is the author of 24 novels set in Africa, including the Sonia Kurtz thriller series. And that's significant because his new book, King of Beasts, is the sixth in that series. Tony divides his time between Sydney in Australia, and you'll be able to tell that the moment he opens his mouth, and Southern Africa, where he and his wife have a home on the border of the Kruger Park. And that's the landscape that runs through nearly all of his fiction. Bonnie Espie is a little further south than that. But she too, well, she is a South African as opposed to an Australian crime writer and the author of the Winifred and Sylvie series, comic crime novels, dark-souled comic crime novels set in the fictional winelands village of Riviersvalley. Her latest, Lifting the Lid, is the second in the series. We've been working with Bonnie on her books for some time and truly love them because we know them from the ground up, so to speak.
Yet, Richard, you're not managing to say Riviersvallei correctly.
Riviersvallei.
You're losing your South Africanism.
I know. It's a terrible fact. Losing your roots, you know?
Yep.
Okay. So let's begin. I want to start with a couple of kind of scene-setting questions for each of you before I invite you to read shortish sections from the new books that you will be talking about. Tony, Sonia Kurtz, who is she, and what is the setting for King of Beasts?
Yeah, thanks, Richard, and welcome everybody. Great to see where everyone's from. I do know quite a few of those places myself. As an Aussie, I'm an Aussie, but I should add I'm applying for permanent residency here in South Africa at the moment. So we're making the transition. Sonia Kurtz is a Namibian-born woman of German extraction, Namibian German. She's around about 50 these days. She grew up in the wilds of Namibia on a farm, and later, after Southwest Africa became Namibia, she and her family moved to Botswana, and she grew up in the Okavango Delta. So the first book that introduces her is called the Delta. She had a very troubled childhood. Her parents split, and her mother was British, so she ended up moving to the UK, as quite a lot of Southern Africans do these days, and look for opportunities for work and went into the military. Again, quite a few people I know have done that. She was in the British Army in the 1990s, where she was part of a real-life unit that trained women to operate undercover in Northern Ireland, where they wouldn't raise as much attention from the IRA as men. So there's grains of truth to her character, and she later, after leaving the military, took up a role as a private military contractor, what we would loosely call a mercenary these days. And her adventures have continued over 6 books, not only action and adventure, but her personal life has been very up and down, quite traumatic. She has a daughter who goes missing in King of Beasts. King of Beasts plays out mostly in the South African Lowveld, near where I live, just sort of east of Hoedspruit, in a fictionalized version of the Timbavati and Manuletti game reserves in that area. Sonia's daughter has been on an archaeological dig in the Ukraine. She's kidnapped by a Russian soldier of fortune / gangster was also on his way to South Africa to hunt a white lion. So the book looks at environmental issues, including trophy hunting, very much in the news today, the use of drones in military contexts and anti-poaching context. And Sonia is blackmailed into allegedly helping the Russians get hold of the drone while the evil gangster goes hunting an endangered white lion.
Okay, couldn't be more up to the minute, Tony. Right. Bonnie, tell
Bonnie.
us about Winifred and Sylvie and
So,
about your
yeah.
location. Yeah.
So Winifred and Sylvie. Winifred has escaped Johannesburg and she's moved to a small village in the Western Cape. She just wants to open a bookshop and she bumps into Sylvie, who is a local, and this very unlikely pair open up a bookshop cafe. And unlike most, begins like a cozy crime. There's a body on the floor. On the day of their launch, where everyone's left, and they find someone dead on the floor, and that's where I turn the scales on the typical cozy crime and make it, I hope, very funny, little dark, but funny. So that's them in a nutshell. It's two very unlikely women who are in a joint venture.
Can I follow that up with a question that I'll also put to Tony, although Tony, you've kind of answered it already, and that is, where did the inspiration come from? I mean, for the darkness, Bonnie.
I don't know where the darkness came from. The inspiration for the book overall was that Bonnie left Johannesburg and moved to a small village in the Western Cape. No is to open a bookshop, but was planning to finish writing the bloomin' book she'd been writing for 4 years. So, and yeah, the inspiration, the darkness, I don't know. It came because, as I kept saying to Richard at the time, I didn't want my novel to be twee. So I think I kept just challenging the sort of typical cozy crime genre at the time, and that's, I think, where the dark happened. But I hope I do make it funny. It's not to be put off. It's funny dark.
So you're a contrarian, I would guess.
I think so, perhaps, yes.
And Tony, your inspiration for King of Beasts?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't plot. I've got to write a book a year. I produce a novel a year. That's how I earn my living. And I just think ideas, I don't overthink it, but something just pops into your head. I'm actually, although I love writing, it's the only thing I ever wanted to do. I think if I wasn't a writer, I like archaeology. I think I would have been an archaeologist. So I watched lots of YouTube documentaries and old episodes of the Time Team and stuff like that because I'm interested in archaeology, particularly military archaeology. And I remember seeing a story about the Russians had blown up a dam in the Ukraine, and the floodwaters had revealed this sort of medieval city village and some sort of very valuable pieces of archaeology. And there was a team of international archaeologists that were working very close to the front line to try and save this stuff. I thought, oh, Sonia Kurtz has a daughter who's a military archaeologist. And I said, I could put her there. And then I saw a YouTube video about a South African guy who'd signed up to fight for the Ukrainians. And then I started seeing these stories about these African guys that were being recruited by the Russians, as many of you would have seen in the news. And they were mostly Kenyans and Nigerians and Sudanese. So as I started writing, I had a Nigerian character in there. And oh, lo and behold, it turned out that a particular political party in South Africa was also sending some of its members for training. So as I was writing, I learned that there were people from KwaZulu-Natal ending up in the Ukraine. I'm like, thank you, Providence, great inspiration. B, you can't make this stuff up, Richard, and that's why I love writing contemporary African fiction. You don't have to try too hard to find something interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we're going to follow it as I said. We're going to kick off with these readings. We've asked you to identify passages a couple of minutes long that tell us something about the character and something about the nature of the tone of the book. So, Tony, would you like to start?
Yes, right. So this is the new book, King of Beasts, comes out next week, and it's where we're reintroduced to Sonia. She has a boyfriend, Hudson Brand, who manages a luxury private game lodge. Our retired mercenary woman of action finds herself helping to manage the lodge, a role she's not overly keen on. The guests have just arrived back from the evening game drive. Hot towel? Sonia Kurtz forced a smile and held the silver platter out to the first of the guests, who awkwardly made her way down from the Ineos Grenadier game viewing vehicle that had just pulled up under the thatched portico at the entrance to Balmoral Lodge. It was the woman from New York, gold necklace and bangles, leopard print scarf. The guest landed heavily and snatched up a towel. Gee, thanks, but what I'd really like is another gin and tonic. Be a dear and go get me one. Sonia kept her rigid smile in place. Of course, I'll just make sure your friends are, I'm thirsty, honey, and your handsome and golden Portuguese American whatever sidekick can take over towel duty, I'm sure. Sonia glanced over her shoulder. Hudson Brand, that's her boyfriend, was there chatting to the woman's husband, who had alighted after her without a glance in her direction and was telling Hudson about the lion they'd just seen. Hudson caught Sonia's eye, said something to the husband, and ushered him through to the lodge. He strode back to Sonia. Is there a problem, miss? The woman said to Sonia. I think with what we're paying to stay here, asking for a simple drink shouldn't be such an issue. Sonia eyed the CZ hunting rifle that she knew was in the green canvas bag in the rack on the game viewer's dashboard. Bongani Ngabeni, the guide who'd been driving the tourists, and Innocent Ngwenya, his tracker, got out of the vehicle. Mary, Bongani smiled widely. You look like someone who'd appreciate another G&T. The woman put her hands on her hips. Bongani, you're a saint. At least someone around here knows the meaning of good service. Bongani grinned at the woman. Let's adjourn to the bar, he said. As Mary led the way, Bongani gave Sonia a wink. Thanks, Bongani, Sonia said quietly. Let me take your rifle to the armory for you. Sure, with Sonia. Sonia reached in and took the gun case from the rack. Bongani followed the tourist towards the lodge. She unzipped it, withdrew the rifle, and worked the bolt to open the breech and check it was clear and unloaded. It was. She took a moment to compose herself. Having the rifle in her hands did not make her want to kill the pushy guest. She wasn't that crazy, but it seemed to ground her. This was familiar, her safe place. She never felt at ease when she was unarmed, forever patting her side or the small of her back, looking for the pistol that wasn't there. Hudson came up beside her now that the tourists had all filed under the portico and onto the decking lit with hanging hurricane lanterns. You okay? She exhaled. When she opened her eyes, she looked at him properly, his face calm and handsome as ever. He smiled at her, and the flickering lantern light caught his eye. What had she ever done to deserve this man? Well, I didn't kill her. He put a hand on her arm and gave it a squeeze. See, you're making progress.
That's very nice.
Thanks.
I love the humor that laces through it.
Yeah. Thanks, Ned.
Okay, Bonnie, your turn.
Thank you. So just that everyone can see, that's the cover of the new book. And I'm reading right from page 1, where we find Sylvie and Winifred in Sylvie's garage, and they're standing in front of the chest freezer. And it's from Winnie's point of view. I saw it, the body, the note, tremors ripple through me and force out laughter, loud and abundant. Sylvie's about to say something, but her words dry up. Her mouth falls open. My response is inappropriate, but there's no stopping the guffaw once it's got going. I think you need a shot of something strong, she says. Come, you're in shock. She leads me through to the kitchen, hand hot on my arm, and sits me down at her parlour table. Here's something to warm you, she says, pouring generous slugs of Clippies into 2 tumblers. Drink. She eyes me with anxious concern. The brandy burns as it slides down my throat. What an idiot I've made of myself with my embarrassing overreaction, I think. And then, goodness, listen to me. Making light of finding a corpse. That's not normal. That cannot become my new normal. So mystery solved, Sylvie says. He didn't skip town. He was lying on ice, waiting for someone to discover him. She rotates the tumbler, watching the liquid swirl with an almost bemused look on her face. Someone put him there, Wins. I mean, he didn't volunteer to climb in and close the lid, did he? Thing is, who gave him the push? What are we going to do with him? Perhaps we should ask on the village WhatsApp if anyone's missing a body. We won't just hand it over like lost property. They'll have to say whose body it is before we let it go. Stop it, Sylvie. This isn't funny. What did the note say? She shrugs, pushes up from the table and disappears into the garage. She's more ballsy, my Sylvie. You couldn't coax me to lift that lid again. A moment later, she drops the note on the table. A collage of letters cut from the local Rafis Falais headlines stare back at me, uneven and menacing. It appears you ladies are skilled in handling situations like this.
Okay, great cliffhanger to leave us on. Okay, now I'm going to go back to you, Tony. You first wrote your first Sonia book 22 years ago, is that right?
My first novel came out 22 years ago. Interestingly enough, that was always a standalone, but King of Beasts is also the sequel to that. So while it's the sixth Sonia Kurtz book, it's this also the sequel to my first book, Far Horizon, which came out 22 years ago. And the first Sonia Kurtz book, The Delta, came out about 4 years, I think about 2008, 2009, something like that. So, but you're right, it is a sequel to my first book, but that wasn't one of the Sonia books.
Okay, that's a very complicated answer.
Very complicated. It's a double sequel.
Yeah. So the question that I had when I heard that was, how on earth did you capture the voice? Had it shifted across all of the books in between? I mean, she is 20 years older than she was. In your head,
Yeah.
she's 20 years older than she was as well.
Yeah, exactly. She has changed. Initially, she was going to be a man, because when I first wrote The Delta, I thought I've covered various things in Africa and poachers and hunters and cops and all this kind of thing. And I was getting my Land Rover service, and I met this elderly gent who traveled to the Congo, the DRC, or back when it was the Belgian Congo. I said, "Oh, what were you doing up there? Were you a miner?" He said, "No, I was a mercenary." And I thought, "Oh, I could write a book about mercenaries." And of course, when you write a mercenary book, you think, yeah, Bruce Willis, no problem. And I was on tour with my publicist from Pan Macmillan, and she says, "What are you going to write about next?" And I said, "I write about mercenaries." And she goes, "Oh, male mercenaries or female mercenaries?" I thought, "Oh, there's an idea." And so I was reading a book by Ibn Barlow about the South African mercenary private military company executive outcomes at the time, just out of interest. And Ibn Barlow observed that after the transition to democracy in South Africa, to majority rule, when he set his company up, there were a number of ex-female members from the old South African Defence Force who wanted to join his unit as mercenaries. I thought, wow, okay, I've got myself a story. And I started writing her not as a man, but as a woman, but as a very confident woman, as a very self-assured woman. And she is very much so in that first book. Yes, she's got some troubles, her daughter's misbehaving, whatever, but she's pretty under control. She's under control of her life. And I drew inspiration from a number of women that I served with in the Australian Army. It's a bit of a cliche and it's terribly unfortunate, but it was the case at the time, and many women in uniform will say the same thing these days, is that there is this perception reality that they have to be twice as better as the average male counterpart in uniform to be taken seriously. And I'm very sorry to say that certainly in my day that was true. So the women I served with in the army, like a lot of soldiers, some would join and it wasn't for them and they'd leave, a lot of male soldiers. The women were always outstanding, exceptional soldiers and officers. And she's very self-assured, and her mannerisms and the way she speaks are very much like that. And as I wrote the book, I had to inject a bit of drama. And her daughter goes off the rails. She's a 16-year-old at the time. And Sonia's world starts to unravel, as all of our worlds do sometime. And so the vulnerability came in naturally. What's happened to her over the years is I don't think she's changed that much, in that she's grown and she's regressed. She has gone through a couple of relationships. She's getting better at dealing with things like her own post-traumatic stress disorder. She's getting better at working in relationships. She's very gun-shy when it comes to relationships. She's had bad experiences. But at the same time, she's become stronger within. So in some of the middle books, she's described as almost like a wildcat, like a feral person. She's smoking too much and drinking too much. She's gone downhill. And then she has to get back on top. And then, of course, she comes against another adversity. She's matured like I had. She has bad knees. She has bad left knee, as I do. So you draw from your own experiences. But her daughter's getting older. She's developing a more adult relationship with her daughter. Like a lot of my friends who have kids are, they get to 21, we can be friends again, you know. So, but she's grown. I think I've grown, and I think that's the most important thing. And we've grown together. And when it says write about what you know is not only the fact that you've been a soldier or a plumber or a pilot, or you've raised kids, or you've been a doctor or a nurse. It's also your relationships and how your life has carried on, and the good times and the bad times. Write about what you know is as much about here as it is about or what you've done in your life.
Yeah, very good. Okay, thanks. Now, I can't ask the same question of you, Bonnie, until you've written 6 novels in the Winning Sylvie series.
Only 22 books or however many.
But I am interested in how you found their voices, how long it took you to find them, those particular voices, the very distinctive voices of your 2 protagonists.
So first of all, I must say Sylvie has bad knees as well. So it's obviously, as an older generation writer, can also understand that. But I wrote both. I wrote the book, the first novel, Making a Killing. I wrote as two ladies, but I had someone read the book before it went to publication, saying it should be set in the UK, being cozy crime. So I realized then I had done a few things wrong. I hadn't done the setting as South African enough. Yeah. And I guess mostly I hadn't thought about South African characters. So I rewrote it. Yeah. From the beginning, I rewrote the whole thing, changing Sylvie to be a local lady from the Cape, an Afrikaans-speaking lady. And that's really, I think, when the magic started to happen. Because suddenly I had someone who's humorous, just by nature of being from the Western Cape, the lovely lingo, the Afrikaans lingo, the play with words in Afrikaans as well. So that's really, I think, where it started to happen. I had written, but the voices came when I was able to distinguish from Winifred, who's fairly uptight, to Sylvie, who's just like, goes with the flow, loves to dance, loves to sing, loves to cook. So that's really where the 2 voices happened, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what, of course, you share in common, and you to a lesser degree than Tony, if that makes sense, is you're both busy with a series, and a series presents challenges and difficulties of its own. I mean, a lot of them are sort of technical, mechanical problems, but nevertheless, they have to be solved, continuity, timelines, holding it together, making sure that your characters don't forget the things that you, as the writer, are quite capable of forgetting, that happened in book 1 when you're writing, in your case, book 2. But in Tony's case, years and books later, how do you keep track?
Is the question to me, Richard, first?
Yes,
or?
make it to you first.
So
did you find yourself having to go back to the first book repeatedly?
So firstly, I didn't set out to write a series. It was you saying, this is a series. Did you realize that? I'm going, no, 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 it's not. It's not a series. But it was two things that happened to make it a series was the publishers being interested in the novel, giving me a contract on the novel, offering me an offer of publication, and then telling me after that that they didn't like the ending. So I had to rewrite the ending, which then was absolutely had to be a series. Ending on book one is such a cliffhanger that you've got to write book two. So I didn't start writing as a series, and I have had some errors and mistakes in it. I've got a couple of characters that fall off the bus and don't get seen again in book two. One of the characters I felt didn't have a purpose was the constable until two people read the book and said they love him. They hope he's going to be around in book two. So he came back, he was resurrected. So that was a matter of going back to the beginning of book two while it was in progress and adding to it. I did buy a little notebook with an index thingy, ABC on the side, and I was like under W for Winifred. I started writing some notes about Winifred so that I could refer back to it. Well, I never do refer back to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm curious to hear what Tony's got to say because I'm only on book 3 now, and I'm definitely losing some threads. And forgetting characters that I've created that have a place in the books that aren't being carried forward. So, yeah, I'm waiting, Tony, to hear how you keep it all together.
Oh, Bonnie, I don't. I'm hopeless. I'm absolutely hopeless. When I was discussing this earlier via email and just listening to you, I thought I really need one of those little notebook file things. I'll tell you what I did. Again, I didn't set out to write a series. When I first got published, my publisher said to me when I sent my first book in Far Horizon, she says, "Is this part of a series?" I said, "No." She says, "Good," because I don't want to publish a series. Because if no one likes the first one, no one's going to buy the second one. So I was very gun shy about series to start off with. And I wrote The Delta. This was a standalone book about a female mercenary from Namibia. And it did okay. Actually, it got, picked up in the UK and the US, and it did all right. But I didn't write the second in the Sonia Kurtz series for quite a few years. I think it's probably like 4 years or so. And it was really only because I wanted to go to Namibia and I wanted to write it a little bit off with the Australian Tax Office, but I wanted to go to Namibia and write a book set in Namibia. And I thought, oh, Sonia, she's from Namibia. I could bring her back. She could return to her homeland. So there was no planning at all that went into it. And at the time when I was getting ready to write it, I thought, I can't remember what was in all the little details about her life in the Delta. And I don't want to. Life is too short for me to read a Tony Park book, right? Now, I mean, like I've read these things 3 or 4 times during the writing and editing phase. I'm not going to spend a couple of days going back and reading a book I wrote 5 years ago. So there was a friend of mine, a young university student who was interning, helping me with my PR, like with my press releases and very early social media. I said, "Hey, you want another couple of days' work?" I said, "Can you read this book and make a few notes?" And she did. So I outsourced. It's the only time I've ever actually got anybody to help me with any kind of research on a paid basis like that. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, she's that old. Well, she's got blue eyes. Oh, right, I forgot that, And so, yeah, I should be more organized. I think what's happened, so I had to put effort into rebuilding her in the second one. So I think you're right, Bonnie. You do have to pay attention to this stuff. And nobody's picked me up on any errors in her continuity. But I think I've become, because I've written 6 books with her, I do know her quite well now. I didn't know her when I wrote book 2. I did not. I had forgotten so much about her, like what year she was born in, what year she was in the British Army, how old her daughter would be now, all these sort of little details. And it was funny, I was writing King of Beasts, and she's wearing a tank top shirt off and talking to someone, and I thought, hasn't she got a tattoo? And then I thought, oh, she does. She has the latitude and longitude of Mao in Botswana. tattooed around her bicep. I'd forgotten in all those books. I could have referenced Mount and the Okavango Delta with her tattoo. And then I had to go back, get my copy of the Delta, because I don't have anybody helping me anymore, and flick through this damn thing until I could find the mention of the tattoo in there. So the lesson out there is be organized. And I think take notes and note this stuff if you're going to do a series. But then again, it also comes to the way I write. I don't plot. I don't overplan. For me, writing the story is the most important thing. If I don't know Sonia's birth date or her daughter's birth date, I can go find that later if I need it. I don't have to be too obsessed with getting it right first. If I was a plotter, I probably would have little character profiles and encyclopedias of the Sonia Kurtz series. I've got another series with the detective Sunny van Rensburg, and she has 3 kids, and no one's picked this up. But I'm fairly sure in one of those books I got the order of the children wrong, where the eldest is actually the middle one. But that's a little, sorry about that if anyone comes across that.
Okay, good. Now, a related question that applies to what you've just said is, and Bonnie, it struck me that this was a pertinent question because you said as much when we were talking about book 3, and you said, book 3 is absolutely the last one I'm going to write because I'm already bored with the characters. How I would write book 4, I have no idea. So the question is, what is more difficult? Keeping each new book in the series fresh and original, or keeping boredom at bay? Is it an issue for either of you? Tony, starting with you.
Keeping boredom at bay is a really good motivator because, if you find yourself writing and you're falling asleep or you're falling asleep halfway through the first edit, like other people are going to put this thing down a long time. And because my books are, I guess, more action oriented, there's plenty of romance in there. Most of my readers are female. I don't write for a particular gender or anything, but there is a fair bit of action and adventure, and that keeps me motivated and keeps it going. And so I think, again, it's the plotting, not plotting thing is I don't put a lot of thought into it, but I would love to tell you these are literary character-driven novels, but they're not. They're action-adventure, but they have a strong central character, and she has to go through her ups and downs. But that's the main motivator for me. And does it get difficult? Yes. So, okay, my books they have an environmental issue. So the book starts off, I have an idea for a book about abalone, which was the 5th book in the Sonia Kurtz series. Set in the Cape, there Sonia just happens to appear. So it becomes a Sonia book. So I don't have to think, should I do another Sonia book? Shouldn't I? Because it's more of a matter of she kind of fits the story. So don't overthink it. That's my message, I think, to people when you're writing is don't overthink it. Write because you want to write. Just get stuck in. Sort out the other detailed stuff first. But yes, the pitfalls are it can get harder because what happens next? She had a bad relationship. She ends up in a good relationship. Next book, is it a good relationship and they get married and ride off into the sunset? Well, no, maybe not. You want to keep that tension there. And she's been with Hudson Brand a long time now, and they've had the ups and downs, but she's growing and getting better. And there is an ending of sorts in King of Beasts, which I certainly won't be revealing. But do I want to leave it open for another one? I don't know. And some of my readers you can take cues from readers on this. I know a lot of my readers like the Sonia Kurtz series, but I know a few don't like her. They don't like her. They think she's too nasty and mean. So she's becoming a little bit softer as she gets older, naturally. But I don't overthink, Richard. I think that's my thing. I need a premise for a new book. Maybe it's a Sunny van Rensburg. Maybe it's a Sonia Kurtz. Maybe it's a standalone. I don't over-engineer it because that's the way I write. I just push on, try and keep myself interested as I'm working. If I'm falling asleep, Sonia either shoots someone or she has sex. Simple as that. Just to sort of keep things going.
Well, now I know how to carry on with my books. They're going to shoot someone or have sex. Easy. It's all done.
Exactly. That's all you need, Bonnie. Yeah.
So for me, I was battling for book 3, but now that I sort of know where I'm heading with book 3, I also don't plot. I don't know how people plot because the ideas come as I'm writing them. And today I actually heard Richard's voice in my head where I jumped a scene and I knew Richard would say, but you've got to just, what about that? And today I had a good writing day, almost 1,000 words, which is quite a lot for me. And it was because I had fun. I suddenly got funny again. So I
Yeah.
wrote two scenes that I think are funny. I hope my readers find them funny too. But it was, yeah, I've suddenly had an injection of enthusiasm in book 3. So because I didn't avoid a scene, I was like, not going to write it. And I thought, Richard will say, you've got to write that. Oh, okay. So now I have, and I think it's funny. And yeah, the boredom has, like Tony said earlier, the social media doesn't help. Social media for book 2 is not over by any means, but the sort of big pushes is a little further down the tunnel now. So I'm able to go back to writing
Yeah.
and am having fun with book 3. So
Thank goodness that
thank
the
goodness. Yeah.
yeah.
Whether it'll go to book 4, I still, the jury's out on that. So we'll see.
Okay. I just want to pick up on what Shannon said. Somebody once suggested to me to use index cards, one for each character with the basics so that I could look back on them to keep track on them. If you do a series, do you have to be careful not to mention current events so that you don't have problems with timelines? What do you think? Tony, it's more pertinent for you.
Yeah, I do unashamedly use current events. I think you have to be a little bit careful. Like I'm writing a book that'll be out. The one I'm writing now for next year won't be out till October next year. So you want to make sure your story is future-proof to the fact that it won't have radically changed by within 8 months' time. I used to get worried about it. These books, I write about contemporary Southern Africans. I write about contemporary issues that includes corruption and politics and things like that. And I've even referenced things in this book because it's about Ukraine. I've even referenced that ship that was, allegedly caught in Cape Town Harbour when the Americans said that the South Africans were shipping arms to the Ukraine. So that's happened in the past. So I've put that in there, but it's helped set the stage for this work of fiction. I'm lucky because I do a book a year. I can get away with mentioning current affairs. Dion Mayer does it. Dion Mayer is always used to be talking about the Guptas and things like that, and his books are often quite timely in terms of commissions. He'll have a fictitious version of the commission that's going on into crime. And what reassures me about this is my second book, Zambezi, which came out in 2005. Overseas is probably still one of my best-selling books, and I think even in South Africa, of my backlist, it's one of my best-selling books. And sometimes I think, oh, but it's so dated. It's set in Zimbabwe during Robert Mugabe's rule at the time of hyperinflation, and some of that stuff has continued. It was set in the beginning of the war in Afghanistan. It's incredibly dated. But the good thing is people don't care, and people will still buy When the Lion Feeds by Wilbur Smith, or they still buy The Diamond Hunters and Elephant Song, even those books are very much of the early 20th century in the 60s and 70s and 80s. I think the story is paramount. Shannon, it's a really good question, and I'm really glad you asked it because I had to just think about that. And so, no, I don't think you should be too scared or worried about mentioning current events, as long as you think that by the time the book comes out, it'll still be relevant.
And remember that War and Peace was written 212 years ago. Yeah, still a bestseller. Yeah. Okay. Now, something else. I mean, this is very close to my heart because it's central to the project that I'm working on myself, and that is setting, all right, the locations that you use, which are so powerful in both of your books that they become, in a sense, a character. I mean, they are more than a backdrop. They are an essential tone. I mean, for me, if you use your setting well, it gives rise to story ideas. And I wonder what your comments are on that, starting with you, Tony.
for me, it's absolutely crucial because it's the genre that I write in. And so Australia and South Africa are my biggest markets. The books are set in the bush. I would say that in Australia, I don't know what the percentage would be, but I would say the overwhelming majority of my readers in Australia are either expatriate South Africans and Zimbabweans, or they're Aussies that have been on safari. And they're probably buying the books, at least initially, because of where they're set, because they've been to the Kruger Park, or they've been to Victoria Falls, or they've been to Namibia. Oh, yeah, I've been there. I want to read a book set there. Absolutely, 100%. 100% for me. The pressure on me is to get it right. Woe betide me getting it wrong as to where, at what latitude the Mapani trees start growing in the Kruger Park. Don't get that wrong. But I haven't been picked up on too many of those because I write where I am. So if I'm on the KZN coast, I start the book there. If I'm in Namibia, I write there. I look around me and I draw the inspiration from the setting, because the setting is what drew me to this continent in the first place. It's what keeps me excited and what I love so much, as well as the people. And it goes to the people I meet. You know, the cultures and the languages and the way people speak are as much about setting as the landscape is. I spent a lot of time in the Lowveld, and I had a character whose name was Duncan Inyari. And Inyari is Shisonga for buffalo. And quite a lot of my South African readers tried to chip me and correct me and say, it should be Inyati, you made a mistake. And I said, well, mate, where I live, it's Inyari. So, but you only learn that by by being somewhere. So setting is crucial. And I don't think it has to be a setting-driven novel, but it is part of the character. It's part of the story. And the onus is on you to get that as right as any technical thing as you do. And the onus is on you because description, narrative, and dialogue are the key planks of what we do. And you have to be able to do each of them. And description comes to, put us in the situation. Don't overdo it. But as Stephen King says, a few well-chosen details will stand for the rest. So if you've been to a game lodge, you've seen the hurricane lanterns, you've seen the thatch roof portico, you've heard people talking about the lion they've just seen. You don't need a lot, but you've got to get it right. And treat it with as much respect as you treat your dialogue and your narrative.
Yeah. Excellent, excellent advice. And Bonnie, your fictional, can I try it again? No, I won't.
Repeats fillet. So I moved to a small village in the Western Cape, and I actually finished a thriller that I just finished and sent off to some publishers when COVID happened. And I was sitting in a small village, and it was you in isolation, and all I could draw on there and then was my new place where I was living. And I realized so much had actually affected me because having come from Johannesburg with, obviously very different to here. The first scene in Making a Killing when Winifred and Sylvie meet, and Winifred goes home with Sylvie and she gets a little drunk and she's walking home on her own in the middle of the road. That's me. I did that. And that was, for me, a pivotal moment of living in a small village. At midnight, walking down completely alone. You would never dream of doing that in Johannesburg. So all of those little things that come into the setting of Rafis Valley are from a small village, and the experiences I've had living here that are unique. I mean, there was a flood. There's a flood in book one.
Yeah.
They're all things I've drawn from the setting. What I haven't done is I started drawing a map and thought I wasn't going to follow the map of the village religiously. Then I thought, actually, don't even go there because I didn't want that to. So I don't name the same roads. Nothing quite leads to where you think it is, because yes, you don't want a villager saying, but so-and-so street doesn't turn left off King Street or whatever. So it's fictional, but very much part of. When I first had the book published, I tried to not confess that it was where I live, but it is. If you live here, it's this little village, which is just too wonderful from a characterization point of view.
I love the fact that you haven't actually named the village. And Please, you don't want to.
No, I haven't. Yeah, I try not to because it's one of those situations you think, well, people think they recognize themselves in the book. No, they don't. That's
No.
another thing I was very careful of because you just can't. You've got to, it's a melange of all sorts of people. So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right. You are much closer to the answer to the sensations that I'm going to try and evoke in you now than Tony is. But was the news that you had found a publisher for that one signally different from the news that they wanted a second one? Was
You
the
can,
first?
you can tell the story. You tell it.
Yeah, I want you to tell the story.
No, I'll probably get it wrong, Richard. Weren't we all on a all about writing webinar thing, but not webinar to the public, a get together? I can't remember. You're going to have to remind me. When an email came in on my computer. I think that's what happened. You tell.
Yes, yes,
No?
yes. No, but tell me about the feelings inside you. I wasn't there.
Well, just obviously very excited, I'm not sure what else to say.
All right. And
Yeah,
the
no,
second one, did you feel that the second one was, oh, well, this is the second
it
one?
was less, yeah, it was more anticlimactic. And I don't really know why, because I mean, it's just as amazing, to get a second publishing deal as there is the first. There was no reason to feel less excited about it. I mean, book one, absolutely. It was when I actually got the phone call, I was here home alone and could tell no one, sort of, just sort of sat with the news for half a day before I told anyone, because you almost don't trust it. All know how difficult it is to be traditionally published. So it was that dilemma of, is it true? Is it truly true? Before. So I didn't tell anyone until I actually got a confirmation email. But yeah, book two was less of uh, a surprise, maybe is the right word, but equally gratifying.
Yeah. And the path to that first publication was not an easy one. I mean, I know that. Can
Are
you
they
can you
ever?
can you trace that path briefly? Because you could speak for 20 minutes, but don't.
Yes, good. So briefly, as I said earlier, I've been offered a publishing deal, very exciting. Then after the publishing deal, I get told that they would like maybe the beginning should be altered a bit, and maybe the middle a little bit, and also the ending, and you've got 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And for me, it was a realization that that's how I work, but it always was the way I worked in business. So it was goal driven. And the minute that happened, yeah, it was like, stepped on the pedal and off we went. So, and I think the main thing from publishing, traditionally publishing, and I know Tony, I hope, will tell us how he works, but is the waiting. My goodness, it's the waiting. It's a lesson in patience, character building, as my publisher Stevlin from Quella always tells me. And it is, even with book two, waiting to find out if they like it or didn't like it. And, some feedback. It takes a long time. So that's a very frustrating part of traditional publishing
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
the waiting. Yeah.
So
But there's nothing quite like actually holding the book
no,
in your hands
no,
in the end. Yeah.
yeah.
So
And Tony, you kind of, well, partly you have sidestepped some of those issues by having a very interesting hybrid publishing model. Can you describe, again, briefly, but how it works, how your publishing works, because it's
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Yeah. I think to get published, everyone's journey is different. Mine was peculiar. It was quite odd. It's you're almost against the odds of it happening, and there are different ways to it. I had written a novel set in Africa. I didn't know what to do with it. My mum had a friend who ran a bookstore, and her daughter worked for Pan Macmillan in Australia, and that will normally guarantee you not getting published. If your
Yeah.
mum knows someone whose daughter works in publishing, say, have a look at my son's book. Yeah, that's probably the worst thing you can do. But what I didn't know is they happened to be scouting for a novel set in Africa, because they used to publish a woman called Beverly Harper, a wonderful lady who wrote a number of excellent books set in Africa. And unfortunately, Beverly had come down, was diagnosed with cancer, and knew she didn't have that long to go. And with her full knowledge and appreciation in a collaborative way, another author helped her finish her book. And Beverly knew that Pan Macmillan was looking for someone who could fill that void. Very unusual story. What it meant is I had to wait 3 years. But when it comes to feedback on publishing, I had written a novel set in the first person. And when I finished that, I said, I'm never going to write a book in the first person again, ever, as long as I live, because it was too hard. But I finished it. And so to buy time in the 3 years I had to wait to get published, my publisher says, okay, we'd like it. We're probably going to publish it. But what you can do, if you're serious, is go away and turn it from first person into third person. I'm like, yes, I will do whatever you want to, because all I want to do is get published and make this my life. So I did. And that took me about another 8 months or so to do that. So when publishers tell you to do something, they're not doing it because they're trying to tear apart your creative soul and rewrite what you've done. They're doing it often because they know best. I got lucky, got commercially published. Like all first-time authors, I was, in the words of my publisher, pathetically grateful to have been published. And I was. He says, you should be pathetic. And I was. She's a very tough lady. And for many, many years, I let my publisher do what they wanted in terms of giving them international rights and stuff like that. As I got older, and as this became more of a business and more of a varied business with things like independent publishing, any stigma that there was towards self-publishing, and there used to be a bit, rapidly disappeared with the advent of ebooks. I was getting overseas deals, which is great, because you can put on Instagram, hey, I just got a publishing deal in England. What they don't tell you is now, instead of making, like 25 Rand or about $2.50 a book, you're now making in the order of 6 Rand a book, or 30 pence, like, because of the number of hands that those international deals, everyone takes a little cut. And so what I was finding was I needed to take charge of my own author business, and the advent of things like ebooks and print on demand meant that self-publishing all of a sudden got easy. You still had to do it right. You still had to produce a high quality product, but you can take control of your own affairs. And I became, there is a term for us, I'm a hybrid. So in South Africa and Australia, I'm commercially published by Pan Macmillan, and I do love them, and I am grateful, and they're a great publisher. But in the UK and the US, where I have a smaller but dedicated readership, I am way better off self-publishing. And it's probably not worth a commercial publisher publishing me for the numbers that I do, but it's very worth it for me to self-publish, because the returns per book are much higher. So I would say that we live in a world where you can take some charge of your destiny. And my free advice to anybody who does get a commercial publishing deal is, you don't need to sign over your worldwide rights to your publisher, because you have the ability to say, thank you, I'll be published in this country, but when it comes to overseas, I might do my own thing, because no agent would ever give away worldwide rights if they were representing an author. So why should we as the authors feel pressured into doing that? Hope that's enough, Richard.
No, but that's very good advice. So, because you are both, amongst other things, series writers, if anyone here tonight is halfway through book one of what they hope will be a series, what kind of advice would you get them to get right now, to sort out now, rather than after they've done book 3 or 2, Bonnie?
I wish I knew what advice to give them, but I guess it's consider every character in the book and their journey going forward. One of the criticisms I got on book 1, when the publisher read the first drafts, was there were too many characters. So I merged a couple and changed some names to so that it was more one person. But I think in hindsight, I should have given a little more thought to exactly what characters are doing what. Are they walk-ons? Are they interesting enough to stay? I guess that's my advice from a series point of view. And then, like Tony, I don't plot, so I couldn't have guessed when I finished book one that book two story would be what it is, which is completely different to book one because it's about the local wine industry. Book three, I've had to change tact because of new books coming out in the market, where there's two or three very well-known authors that are writing about plants. So I was literally about to do the same, but I've now so it's that whole plotting thing and having a journey for each character is what I would say. That would be, in a nutshell, what I regret not having done.
I've been involved in designing and writing many television series. And what we have to take account of for television is the big arc, the character arc over the entire series.
Yeah.
And I'm now myself writing a series of cozies. And that's one thing that I didn't get right. I wasn't thinking about the big arc for the first 6 books in the series. All right. And I'm trying to get it right for the second 6 books in the series.
Okay.
But that is one thing that I wish somebody had said to me. I mean, Trish tried to say to me to begin with, think about the big arc. And I said, yes, I'm just thinking about book one.
Yeah.
And I wondered whether you have in mind, I mean, Tony, you've spoken about the ups and downs of your character's life. But did you even in the furthest recesses of your mind, did you have an idea of where she was aiming for in the end, if there is an end?
Not at all. Not at all, because like I didn't set out to write a series, but it's a very good question, and it is very true what you're saying, thinking about that. But I do some mentoring, and I think one of the problems I see is people start off writing their first book thinking, I'm going to write a series. Okay. Now just be very wary of that. And if you think I am going to write a series, write that first book as though it's going to be a standalone anyway, so it has an ending. I see too many of my mentees come to me with the manuscript, and you get to the end and you think, well, what happened? Oh, that's in book 2. Do not do that. Absolutely do not do that, because no one might ever buy book 2, and book 2 might not get published. And then I find people, they can't find a publisher for book 1, but they carry on and they write book 2, thinking that if they get a deal, then the publisher will take both. And maybe they will. I know someone that happened to, and then he didn't do too well because people didn't like the books that much. And all your hopes are pinned on this series, where maybe what you should be doing is if you write a book, part 1, part of a series, okay, say you try and get a publisher and you're not getting any traction, write something different. Don't keep flogging it, And I think, but even if you are writing a book, I'm a sucker for a happy ending, like I'm an optimist. I'm an Australian. Me and my wife bought 2 houses in South Africa. We are the definition of optimists, So like every one of my books has an ending. And even though Sonia is troubled and she doesn't get things right, there is some closure at the end of each book, so that if she never came back, people would still be okay, thinking, okay, she had a pretty good life, So just be wary of that. And we don't, as readers, buy a book like we used to buy a comic. I used to buy comics that were weekly comics, and that was part of the attraction, is it ends on a cliffhanger. You don't invest 360 Rand or 32.99 Australian or 18.99 US to be left without an ending. So treat them as installments, right? Not as you have to buy every book.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, we've come more or less to the end, but Tony, I would like you to talk about the availability of your book, because, well, what we said in the beginning. Shoot.
Yes. Okay. So King of Beasts comes out next week in South Africa, a week after that worldwide ebook, print and audio. What I would like to do is offer anybody who's watching or subsequently picks up on the podcast, on the webinar later. I'm very happy to give away a free ebook copy of The Delta, which is the first in the Sonia Kurtz series. And Trish, when she sends the thank yous and the follow-up email for this, it will contain a link where you can download a copy of the Delta from me as my gift to all of you people for watching.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you for participating, giving of your wisdom and your experience. That was great.
Great, thank you.
Bonnie,
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to thank you as well. And I
Thank you
can't
very
wait
much.
to read the 1,000 words that you wrote today.
Yes,
Very
thank
soon.
you. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. It was lovely chatting.
Thank you, everybody.